My name is Benjamin, a regular 32-year-old office worker. Today is the death anniversary of a special person, and I came to visit their grave. Next to the names of our ancestors, there's a name that was carved there not too long ago. It's the name of my wife, Mia, who passed away 2 years ago. I first met Mia back when I was a sophomore in college. She was among the group of women who came to visit our club for an introduction. With her long, elegant hair and shy gestures when I approached her, she seemed refreshingly different. And when I found her name among the potential new club members, I couldn't help but feel thrilled. However, that didn't mean I rushed into making a move. Taking advantage of my role as a mentor to the new members, I tried to have as many opportunities to talk to Mia as possible. My perceptive friends knew I was interested in her.
I'll help you out.
One of them said, willing to play matchmaker for Mia and me. One of my close female club members, who knew my intentions, asked out loud during the new members' welcome party.
Does Mia have a boyfriend?
Mia shook her head vigorously, her face turning bright red. Even that gesture, I found utterly adorable. Yet, for a while, I struggled to find a chance to get closer to Mia. The opportunity to have a proper conversation with her just didn't seem to present itself. During that time, instead of giving up, my feelings for Mia only grew stronger. Finally, about half a year later, I got a chance to approach Mia when we were preparing for the campus festival. As the campus festival approached, I found myself coming home late due to the preparations. During such times, male club members took turns acting as bodyguards for the female members, ensuring they safely reached their homes. Luckily, Mia and I lived in the same direction, so we walked home together. The time spent walking home with Mia became the highlight of my day, and our conversations were about trivial things, like the events of the day or stories from my hometown. I also learned that Mia was from a single-parent household.
Sorry for making you accompany me home when you also get home late. My house is nearby, so thank you very much.
Mia would say, then hurry home from the midway point. One rainy day, we walked home under the same umbrella. It was unusual for the responsible Mia to forget her umbrella.
I'm really sorry.
She apologized repeatedly to me. Each time she did, I would respond with, "It's okay." But inside, I was feeling quite nervous. You see, occasionally, Maya's hand or shoulder would touch mine. As we continued walking, Mia said her usual phrase,
I'm almost there.
and tried to run ahead. I stopped her, saying, "The rain is quite heavy, so I'll walk you home. I wouldn't want you to catch a cold." At first, Mia seemed taken aback and said, but eventually, she relented and said,
In that case, please.
So I ended up walking her all the way home. When Mia stopped and said,
It's here.
I noticed that it was in front of the gate of a well-known and wealthy family in the neighborhood. As I wasn't from this area, I didn't know the family's surname. Written on the magnificent gate was the same surname as Maya's. I was genuinely surprised. Since I had heard about her single-parent household, I had imagined her living in a small apartment. The reality was far from what I had expected, and I was left speechless. Did she notice my surprise? Mia asked me.
Were you surprised?
Then she said,
Thank you again for today. I'll be fine from here.
and opened the heavy-looking door to enter her house. Thanks to the incident with the shared umbrella, Mia and I became much closer. After the cultural festival ended, I confessed my feelings to her, and we started dating. About half a year into our relationship, Mia told me.
My mother wants to meet you.
I was taken aback and didn't know how to respond, so I froze. Then Mia said,
It's a bother, isn't it? I'm sorry. Just forget I mentioned it.
in that moment, I realized it was a perfect opportunity to have our serious relationship acknowledged. So I replied, I'd love to go. I was nervous and found myself using polite language with Mia. She burst into laughter, and I couldn't help but join in. Next Sunday, I visited Maya's house. I wore a suit for the first time since my coming-of-age ceremony. To be respectful, Maya's house was best described as solemn, just as she had explained that it had been in her family since the 1800s. It exceeded my imagination. As I waited in the guest room, Maya's mother appeared. She was a beautiful woman with an elegant aura. Mia had told me she was in her early 50s, but she didn't look like it at all. Maya's mother, Charlotte, exuded a gentle aura, and her conversations were filled with kindness. As we chatted comfortably, I felt relieved. However, when Mia briefly left the room, Charlotte's expression suddenly turned stern, and it felt unsettling. She asked,
Do you have any siblings?
When I replied, I have an older brother and a younger sister, her expression seemed to ease. Mia returned promptly, and Charlotte resumed her kind and gentle demeanor during our conversation. I quickly forgot about the odd moment and didn't think much of it. From that day on, I was frequently invited to Maya's house. It was a joy to be accepted by Maya's mother, and it seemed she liked me as well. As time went by, I found myself increasingly conscious of marrying Mia, and it seemed she felt the same way. About 2 years after graduating from college, Mia said,
There's something I want to talk to you about.
She straightened her posture, and I sensed it was something important. I mirrored her serious expression and asked, What is it?
I want to marry you, but
Mia stammered. Her use of the word, but alongside the mention of marriage made my heart skip a beat. I waited for her next words. Seeing my reaction, Mia mustered her courage and asked,
do you have any objections to changing your last name?
I wasn't particularly surprised. During conversations with Charlotte, I learned that to inherit the family estate, Maya's future spouse needed to become a son-in-law through adoption. That's why she had asked me if I had any siblings when we first met, to see if I could fulfill that role as the second son. Charlotte seemed relieved when she found out I was indeed the second son. It seemed that I had been subject to a sort of inspection to determine if I was suitable to inherit the family estate. I chuckled a little and said, It's absolutely fine. Maya's eyes widened in surprise. In truth, considering marriage and the conversations with Charlotte, I had already asked my parents, would it be okay if my last name changed? My father replied,
It's your life. If it makes you happy, then it's fine.
My mother jokingly said,
It's so wonderful that there's someone willing to take you.
And laughed. So, becoming Maya's family's adoptive son-in-law posed no problem at all. I proposed to Mia, who was frozen in astonishment, saying, Please marry me. From that point on, our marriage plans progressed smoothly. When my parents visited Maya's home for the first time, they were utterly amazed by its grandeur. My father exclaimed,
Why didn't you tell me she's from such an amazing place?
I replied, Well, no one asked, but it seemed like my father was too shocked to hear my response. Of course, my parents had met Mia before, but upon learning that she was from a single-parent household, my father, just like me, assumed that Mia led a modest life. So I became an adoptive son-in-law, going through the process of formal adoption with Charlotte, and Mia and I submitted our marriage registration, becoming husband and wife. Our life together with Mia after marriage was simply blissful. Though we couldn't have children, the time spent with just the two of us and the family gatherings with Charlotte as our mother-in-law were incredibly soothing for me. Laughter never ceased in our home. However, one day, after about 5 years of such blissful days, my phone rang. The caller was Charlotte. Hello, I answered, and Charlotte's voice sounded anxious as she said,
It's an emergency.
She seemed extremely flustered. I rushed to the hospital as instructed. When I told the receptionist my name, she displayed a somber expression. Then, her words left me in disbelief. I was directed to the mortuary. Following the prompt, I entered the room, and there lay a body. With trembling hands, I cautiously removed the white cloth covering the face, and it was Mia.
It was almost instant death.
Charlotte weakly spoke from behind me. I couldn't accept the reality before my eyes. Maya's face bore no wounds, as if she could wake up any moment and greet me with a cheerful good morning. But Mia remained peacefully asleep. The explanation from the police afterward confirmed that Mia had been involved in a traffic accident where a car ran a red light and collided with her as she crossed the intersection on a green signal. The driver who ignored the signal crashed into a utility pole and passed away. I didn't know where to direct my anger or how to express this overwhelming sadness. My mind went blank and everything around me turned dark. It felt like human thoughts just crumble in such moments. Oddly, despite losing my beloved, tears wouldn't come. I couldn't think of anything. The day Mia passed away, Charlotte wept and mourned bitterly. But afterward, she remained strong as ever. I presided Maya's funeral as the bereaved, but before her cremation that I broke down in tears. All the pent-up emotions surged up. Pathetic as it may sound, I couldn't even stand. I couldn't fathom that I'd never see that smile again, that Mia and I were separated forever. I simply couldn't believe it. In my place, Charlotte took charge of everything. Her appearance seemed as though she was trying to forget the sorrow of losing her daughter. After the funeral and the memorial service on a humid summer night, Charlotte suddenly visited my room. At that moment, Charlotte looked different from her usual composed self. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She glanced around my room and murmured,
Her scent still lingers here, doesn't it?
Then she burst into tears. I couldn't bring myself to touch Maya's belongings, fearing that memories would fade away. Even though it was impossible, I felt like Mia might return at any moment. Helplessly, I could only watch Charlotte crying intensely. How long had we been like that? Charlotte slowly lifted her face, and her usual composed expression had returned. Then she said something astonishing.
You'll have to find a new partner to remarry.
I was genuinely surprised by her words. Charlotte, what are you saying? I'm not ready for such feelings yet. That's all I managed to say. However, I had a different thought in mind. It meant dissolving the adoption and leaving this house. Legally, I may have become Charlotte's child, but in reality, I was a stranger. Since Mia had passed away, I believed there was no reason for me to remain in this house. Before I could articulate my farts, Charlotte spoke again.
Regardless of your feelings, preserving this house is my duty.
She wiped her tears and continued.
My role is to carry on the family legacy.
At that moment, I didn't realize that the tears she shed and the tears she shed when she came into my room had entirely different meanings. Instead, I felt her words were insensitive, given that I had recently lost my wife. It seems like you only care about preserving this house, and our feelings don't matter to you, I said, feeling both sad and angry. Anyway, I can't even think about remarriage right now. In response, Charlotte murmured softly,
So this family's lineage will end with me.
The words slipped from her mouth. The first time Charlotte revealed her vulnerability in front of me was after losing her beloved husband, inheriting the house as a single mother, and resolutely defending the family's legacy. Hearing her words, I felt the weight of everything she had carried on her shoulders until now. Protecting a house passed down through generations, the daily pressure might have been beyond my comprehension. I wondered if her composed and strong demeanor truly represented the real Charlotte. Of course, her ability to manage the house single-handedly was likely due to the wealth inherited from ancestors. However, to continue managing the house, she couldn't afford to show her weaknesses to outsiders. Come to think of it,
Mom, there are many people who approach you clearly for your wealth.
Mia had once said. At that time, I playfully replied to Mia, I might be one of those types, you know. Mia laughed and said,
You are someone who speaks and acts sincerely. In a good way, you're straightforward. But in a bad way, you're naive. That's why Mama trusts you.
But then, Maya's expression turned serious, and she said,
It's my duty to respond to Mom's feelings. I want to free her from the burden of passing down the house as soon as possible.
I recalled this and felt as though it was Maya's last wish. Your mother has already fulfilled her role sufficiently. I may not have enough strength, but I believe I should share some of the burden of protecting this house with you. I want to continue Maya's aspirations. I am now a member of this family. Though I may not be reliable, I am now the heir to this house. As long as I live, this house will not vanish. I will continue to protect it, along with Maya's will. I will keep on living. So, please think of yourself as having fulfilled your role. It might sound presumptuous coming from someone inexperienced like me, but I will carry this house into the future. I said this and held Charlotte's hand, sitting in front of me. Then, something fell into our hands as we both continued to cry. Charlotte was crying again. Seeing her, I couldn't help but join in. Shedding tears too? You cry a lot today, I said, trying to lighten the mood.
Shut up.
Charlotte replied, tears still streaming down her face. While we both cried, I made up my mind. From now on, I will live for Charlotte's sake. That's what Mia would have wanted. At that moment, I felt as if I had truly become Charlotte's son, a real part of the family. After crying together for a while, Charlotte suddenly stood up and straightened her posture. Her face regained its usual composed expression.
Benjamin, thank you. I'm okay now.
She said, don't push yourself, Charlotte, I said to her. Charlotte smiled gently in response and nodded slightly. It was the first time I had seen her smile in a long time. 2 years later, I decided to remarry. It was with Charlotte's niece, same age with me. She was also calm and gentle, and Charlotte had recommended her to me. When we visited Maya's grave as a family, it was the anniversary of her passing. I was with the woman who would become my new wife. Although it was a marriage arranged by Charlotte, she cried when we first met. She had attended Maya's funeral and had adored Mia like an older sister since childhood. We couldn't stop talking about Mia during our time together. Despite my initial reluctance to remarry, I realized that I could protect this house and continue living with her by my side. Mia might not be in this world anymore, but she lived on within us. As we paid our respects at the grave, our family vowed to connect Maya's legacy with our future.